one bad farming game deserves another. This is the farming game. It's a roll and move. I know, half of you just turned off right now. After Agricola, that was not in any way the relaxation, whatever, that I needed. So I figured I'd pull this sucker out. First, my history on it. A friend of mine picked this up and was really excited about it, primarily because of the color form pieces, which don't actually stick. And that's not, I think, so much because of the age. This is an early 90s game, but just because the material of the board doesn't quite hold them. It's okay. They could be counters for all that matters. But I think that was one of his big obsessions with it is, oh, cool, it's got color forms. However, we played it, and, you know, for a roll and move, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. It didn't match, say, things like Fast Food Franchise in terms of the strategic choices in it for an individual player, and it didn't match things like Monopoly for the uniqueness of the type of operations that are available in it. However, once I moved to Phoenix, I saw a copy of it on auction or something fairly cheap, and I was like, for nostalgia, if nothing else, picked it up. Probably not a great move because it's not a game I terribly like, but it's not a horrible game, I think. I don't know. I have it rated at 5, which might be worse. It might end up worse than I'm remembering at this moment. Like it may drag too much or something. So what's up with the game? Well, the concept of the game is you're a part-time farmer. And you hope to get enough money together. You've just inherited grandpa's farm, and you hope to get enough money together to be able to become a full-time farmer. That amount of money is $250,000 in cash. At the beginning of the game, you start with no cash, a $5,000 banknote, and $5,000. You have a line of credit of $50,000 at the beginning of the game, and I don't think it goes up even if you get more property, which is a little weird. Let's keep going. You have 20 acres of land at the beginning of the game. That 20 acres are worth $40,000 each, and you have a part-time job. Somehow that leads to a $50,000 line of credit, and I don't believe that line of credit changes if you gather more property. First player is determined by die roll. Although the game comes with 2 dice, these are just to mark the color of the player on the board. Matches the color there, using them. I just set it at the upper left corner because that makes my life easier. Other components there are, well, what we see here is wheat and hay. And then you have 2 other things that you can grow, which are apples, and there should be cherries. I think I'll have to look into that because this may just be fruit. It's both apples and cherries. I'm not sure. Look here to make sure. I don't have components there. And we don't have a component list, which is funny because, and then of course there's cash and promissory notes. Let's see what we have here. Yeah, I think that's right. We'll see how it's worded. These wonderful inset pieces. This is going to be your sales chart, generated by randomness. You also have cattle, which you can have, I think it's like 20 heads of cattle on your farm, but otherwise you're going to have to rent places to get your cattle. You have tractors and harvesters, permanent equipment you can buy, otherwise you're going to have to rent it. You have sets of cards. Farmer's Fate, this is just a randomizer. When you land certain spaces, you get that, boom. Operating expenses comes up when you that's option to buy. When you're harvesting, and they're essentially the cost of your harvesting operation. And options to buy come up at random places, and you also start with a couple of them, which allow you to expand your holdings. I did just read these. They don't stick very well. Okay. You can only buy property during the winter. Which I think is the space between Christmas vacation and spring planting. Yeah, including. At this point, you can use an option to buy card, and we'll peek at one just to show you. So option to buy, neighbor sells out 10 acres of hay at $2,000 per acre. It'll cost you $20,000. You don't have money, but you can take out loans, etc. You must have at least 20% in cash, and if you have sufficient credit, you can borrow the rest. Now, he has enough credit, right? Yeah. There's a problem with that, though. You want to have cash on hand to meet your operating expenses, or else you get into trouble. Let's keep going here. The bank expects you to be a good manager and have adequate cash on hand during the game. If your bills leave you with no cash on hand, you have two options. You can borrow money from your neighbors at whatever, which is just the other players, at whatever rate and terms you can negotiate. The concept of neighbor is not defined in the game, and it becomes more important elsewhere, but its use here seems to be. Or you can borrow more money from the bank on your line of credit, but if you are out of cash, have used your credit, and still owe an unpaid bills, you are then bankrupt. The bank will only make new loans for $5,000 of operating cash. The bank charges a 20% penalty loan fee to refinance for this kind of problematic situation, as opposed to when you're buying property, when you can take out loans more easily. So your line of credit is kind of painful to access, I think. Again, the rules are not, well, not again, I haven't said this. The rules are not really well nailed down here. But I think you can take out loans when you purchase property or equipment, and that's no big deal. But if you have to take them out for operating expenses, you pay this additional 20% penalty loan fee. So if you get a $5,000 bank note, you get $4,000 in cash. I don't know what they will only make new loans for $5,000 means. I don't know if that's a limit, or if you must take a $5,000 loan no matter what. Maybe it's both. Harvesting crop. So you roll one die to move. You move that many spaces. You get affected by it. It could be good. It could be bad. Whatever. But when you hit one of these colored zones on the board, bracketed by color, you're allowed to harvest crop. Crops are harvested on the first week of the harvest zone in which the player lands, which means if you roll and land here and then land here again, you don't get to harvest twice. And you're also safe from disasters on that crop if the crop's already been harvested. The method of harvesting is a roll of a die. You roll up here, You see how many acres you have, and it's just a multiplier times times a base price for each 10 acres. If you extend beyond 60 acres or whatever, that's fine. You just multiply it out further. That's just for ease. And that's how much money you get for your crop. However, you also have to draw an operating expenses card, and you want to do this after you pull your crop, because there could be problems, and you want to pull any farmer's fates or whatever after you harvest your crop. And then you pay the expenses that are involved in the operating expenses. The net income could be positive or negative. Okay. You're not selling land or the actual base livestock. You're selling calves and produce and whatever. Option to buy. When you have one of these, you're allowed to buy the property that's available on the thing or take a lease. It's a combination of cash and bank financing. When you're instructed to do so on the board, you get new cards. You keep it until you exercise it or sell it to another player. OTB cards can only be exercised during the winter, between and including Christmas vacation and spring planning for each year. When a purchase is made, you pay the bank, you take the correct vinyl thing, stick it on your farm, and replace the OTB card at the bottom of the deck. OTB cards can be sold to other players at whatever prices they can agree on. They can make various agreements there. The ownership limit in the game is that the farm that you actually have in the valley, no matter how big it gets, will only handle 20 cows maximum. Otherwise, you have to do options to lease, which are in the option to buy cards, I think. Farmer's Fate, you draw it, and you put it at the bottom of the deck after it takes its effect. If you're in a harvest season, you don't want to draw a fate card before you complete your harvest because it could impact it negatively. Owning equipment, it could impact it positively though too. Owning equipment, the assumption is that the small farmers don't have a tractor or a harvester and they have to rent it. When you receive a bill for an equipment expense, you pay the bill to the bank unless a neighbor owns the equipment. In this case, the payment goes to the equipment owner. If multiple owners own the piece of equipment that you need, you split the payment between them. Okay, so this is a little weird because to me it seems like with all the deal making and everything, you should be able to choose who you do. I don't know whether or not I'm going to worry about that, but that could be some functionality that allows you to kind of pick on the people who are winning and not help them out equally with everyone else. But in that case, then you might be able to negotiate. Now, if there's only one person, yeah, never mind. Okay, the bank. The bank it's just a bank. It doesn't do anything exciting. It's just a source of the cash in and out of the game. There's some weeks that say double your hay or corn harvest that year. If that happens, you rotate that particular commodity type and you'll remember that it's doubled. It can be multiply doubled, in which case I guess it's upside down or whatever. I don't know how many times you can double it. And that's just going to increase the value. Harvest can also be cut in half. And if it's cut in half and a $50 bill is needed, there are no 50s in the game. You round up, I guess, in your favor. Again, the wording's a little weird. If you're in a situation that takes more cash than you have on hand, you can borrow from the bank, paying the 20% refinance penalty. Another option is to borrow from neighbors at whatever agreement upon terms you can have. I think they probably should be binding because you probably will write some sort of contract with them. How that's going to interact with other creditors, I would say that players as creditors get their money last, but then they divide it up equally. I'm just making shit up on my own to make this thing work because the rule is not well defined, but the intention is fairly. However, Then, if you still can't make the money after you've borrowed your maximum bank credit of $50,000 and you have bills that require more cash than you have in hand, you can try to sell movable equipment to neighbors at, this is cattle and equipment, at reduced prices. You can work out some kind of deals, rentals, whatever. But if none of that gets resolved, then all non-bankrupt players roll a die. The high roller is the auctioneer. The auctioneer chooses a property to be sold to satisfy the debt. Bidding begins at 50% of the asset's value. The highest bidder wins, and the auction continues until all outstanding bills and banknotes are paid in full, and the bankrupt farmer has at least $5,000 in cash. If the player has any productive assets left, he can continue the game. If not, he goes and lives in an apartment house somewhere. The end of the game. You have to have $250,000, in net assets, not in cash. When you believe you've accumulated $250,000 in assets, you can call for an audit. An audit is conducted of all players when the audit caller finishes the calendar year and reaches Christmas. The farming game can also be played on a time limit if you wish. During the audit, each player counts up total cash, adds the value of their property and equipment based on an original purchase price, and subtracts the value of any banknotes held. Leases are not considered of any value, but the cows on the leased land are. If the caller of the audit has less than $250,000 when he hits Christmas, which he could have had the $250,000 and lost money, he's assessed a cash penalty for creating a market panic. The penalty is whatever other players can agree to, up to a limit of 25% of the audit caller's total net assets. It's possible for more than one player to have in excess of $250,000 and become a full-time farmer and therefore a winner, but the player with the highest total is the actual winner. You can make up rules as you like. There's some discussion about what's what, but nothing that really pertains to the game. That's it. It's a really, really simple, roll and move type game. Most of it is embedded in the events that you're going to be facing. The thing I can say is farming is a tough business, and you don't want to spend all your money right up front and buy your options, I think. I think that would probably be a mistake. That's about the only thing that I can really remember about it. We'll start playing and see just how bad this is. It cannot be worse than Agricola.